Hey, my name's Dean, and up until a few months ago I thought solid marriage. I mean, Avery and I had Ma and Lucas. Life was good, or so I thought. Things started feeling off around last summer. Avery had always been Dina Gavin to help out. Gavin was a charming guy, a bit younger than us, with that kind of easygoing personality and honestly, he did a great job with the garden. Avery raved about his work all the time. But then there were these Avery was spending a lot more time outside, even when she didn't need to be. She'd come in late, all flustered and SWU gardening tricks. At first, I brushed it off. She'd always been passionate about our garden, so it didn't seem like he'd giggle at texts and quickly put her phone away when I walked into the room. I told myself I was just being paranoid that, but the nagging feeling wouldn't go away. One evening, I decided to confront her about it. She got defensive about the garden. "Dean, you're imagining things. Gavin's just a gardener," she said, rolling her eyes. I wanted to believe her, but something wrong. Over the next few weeks, the strange behavior continued. Avery started dressing up more, even for just hang tees that she never bothered with before. I told myself she just wanted to look good. Who doesn't want to feel attractive night that changed everything? It was a warm Friday evening, and I'd come home early from work. The kids were at Iving Room and noticed the back door was slightly ajar. Curious, I headed out to the garden. I wish I hadn't. There they were, Avery and Gavin, in a tight embrace, kissing like earth sank. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. They didn't see me at first, too wrapped up in each other. When they as some sort of misunderstanding. "Dean, it's not what it looks like," she stammered. But her flushed face, and the didn't believe it. My wife was having an affair with the gardener. I turned and walked back inside, my mind reeling. How and what the hell was I going to do now? I spent that night in a restless daze replaying the scene of Avery and Gavin key up from. How could she do this to us? To our family? The next morning Avery acted as if nothing had happened but I needed more proof before I made any decisions. I decided to check her phone, something I had never done unlocked, and I quickly navigated to her messages. My heart pounded as I scrolled through her conversation with GA. There were texts filled with flirtation, explicit messages, and even plans for their next rendezvous. I took screenshots. Could deny it now. When she came out of the shower, I was waiting for her in the living room, my hands shaking at me, a flicker of guilt crossing her face. "Dean, Her face went pale, and she sank onto the couch, burying her go this far. I laughed bitterly. "Didn't mean for it to go this far. You've been cheating on me with our gardener, Avery. To our kids." She looked up, tears streaming down her face. It was a mistake. I was lonely. And he was there. It didn't rising. You planned this. You lied to me every day. How am I supposed to believe you now? She reached out to Teak and fix this. "I love you, and I love our family." I shook my head, feeling a tear slip down my own cheek. I don't know if in my heart. I grabbed my keys and left the house, needing to get away from her lies and deceit. I drove aimlessly, TR lashing in my mind. I thought about our kids, Emma and Lucas. How would this affect them? How could I explain this to them? After a few, her eyes red and puffy from crying. "Dean, please," she begged. "Let's try to work this out, for the kids." I sat down. I'll try counseling. "But Avery, this isn't going to be easy. You've hurt me in ways I can't even describe." She nodded. "Whip it up to you." We sat there in silence, the weight of what had happened hanging heavily between us. I didn't know if O was willing to try. The days following our confrontation were a blur. Avery and I moved through the house like strangers, the tension so ling, but the appointment wasn't for another week, and every day felt like an eternity. One evening, I came home from Ounta, talking to Avery in a low voice. My blood boiled at the sight of him in my home, but I forced myself to stay calm with barely controlled anger. Avery looked startled, and Gavin straightened up, his expression a mix of guilt and "We need to talk." "Talk," I scoffed, glaring at Gavin. "There's nothing to talk about. Get out of my house." Gavin looked at an apology as he left. I slammed the door behind him and turned to Avery, my hands trembling with rage. How could Lel let him into our home? Avery burst into tears, but I was too angry to care. Dean, I just wanted to explain. I thought Head bitterly. What's there to understand, Avery? You cheated on me with the gardener. You've lied to me, betrayed MND. For a moment, I felt a pang of guilt. But then I remembered the texts, the videos, and my resolve hardened. You need to make a choice, Avery. It's him, OH desperation. Dean, please. I don't want to lose you. I don't want to lose our family. I'll end it with Gavin. I promise. I said coldly. But if I find out you're still seeing him, we're done. Avery nodded, her tears falling silently. I walked our place where I had first discovered her betrayal. The garden, once a place of peace and beauty, now felt tainted. She avoided Gavin, deleted his number, and focused on trying to repair our relationship. We went to our first counts in the right direction, but the anger and hurt were still there, just below the surface. Every time I looked at her, I saw he was thinking about him. It was a constant struggle, and I didn't know if I could ever get past it. One evening, a proposal. Dean, I've been thinking, maybe we should move, start fresh somewhere new where we don't have the move. Where would we go? Anywhere, she said, her eyes pleading. Just somewhere we can have a fresh start. For us Hind, both terrifying and tempting. I'll think about it, I said finally. As I lay in bed that night, I realized that maybe a free hat, no matter where we went, the pain of her betrayal would follow us. It was something we'd have to confront. Our days turned into weeks, and the weight of Avery's betrayal continued to hang over us like a dark cloud. The initial sheesh into every aspect of my life. I found myself snapping at the kids over the smallest things, avoiding conversations with friends, and losing focus at NG to find my footing. Our counseling sessions were a mixed bag. Some days, it felt like we were making progress. PE Ike, we were just going through the motions, saying what we thought the counselor wanted to hear. Avery was trying tea like too little, too late. One night, after a particularly grueling session, I found myself alone in the living room, nursing and Avery upstairs, probably crying herself to sleep. I couldn't bring myself to join her. I needed space to think, to breathe. I looked around the room at the family photos, tainted now, overshadowed by her betrayal. I picked up a photo of our wedding day, a day that had once been, hit me like a tidal wave. Anger, sadness, betrayal. I felt like a fool for not seeing the signs, for trusting her so blindly. I wouldn't solve anything. Instead, I let the tears come, silent and unbidden. I hadn't cried since that night in the guard, the next day at work. I could barely concentrate. My colleagues noticed my distraction, but I brushed off their concern a thread. Every time my phone buzzed, I feared it was another message from Avery. Another plea for forgiveness, the missed deadlines, forgot important meetings. And my boss called me into his office more than once to ask if everything, promising to get back on track. But the truth was I didn't know how to. The emotional toll was immense. I felt like IWE around me. The joy I once found in my kids, in my work, in life itself, was gone, replaced by a constant ache in my chest. One Eve at me with her big, innocent eyes. Daddy, why are you sad all the time? Her question hit me like a punch to the gut. Just tired, sweetie. Daddy's had a lot on his mind. She seemed to accept my answer, but I could see the worry in her awful demeanor dampened by the tension in the house. It broke my heart to see my children affected by this. To know that night, after the kids were asleep, Avery came to me. She looked exhausted, her eyes red and puffy from crying. But I love you, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make this right. I looked at her, the woman I had loved for so was buried deep under layers of pain and mistrust. Avery, I don't know if we can ever go back to what we were. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I understand. But I'm not giving up on us, Dean. I can't. I love you too, her words, sincere as they were, felt like a dagger in my heart. I wanted to believe her, to trust that we could rebuild NG8th, to try. As the weeks turned into months, the strain between Avery and me became a constant undercurrent in from the worst of it, the tension was palpable. Emma and Lucas became more withdrawn, their laughter less freak, continued to make an effort. She stopped seeing Gavin immediately after our confrontation and threw herself into teached attended, albeit reluctantly on my part. Despite her efforts, I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal and the lingering doubts that clouded my mind. One even myself alone in our bedroom, staring at the ceiling. Avery was downstairs, likely crying or journaling as she often did the moment I first suspected something was wrong to the painful confrontation and the days that followed. I ring me, but was also unfair to our children. They deserve better than a broken home filled with unspoken resentment. We headed to the nearby park, a place we used to visit often with the kids. It was a beautiful sunny day, but the heaviness in my heart made it hard to appreciate the beauty around us. Avery, I with apprehension, her eyes filled with worry. What is it, Dean? I've been thinking a lot about us, about everything that if I can ever fully forgive you for what you did. The trust is gone, and without it, our marriage feels like a shell of Ned silent, waiting for me to continue. I know you've been trying, and I appreciate that, I said. But I can't keep living like it's not fair to me. It's not fair to you, and it's definitely not fair to Emma and Lucas. Her voice trembled as she spoke. Shook my head. I'm not giving up, Avery. I'm just acknowledging that some things can't be fixed. I think we need to figure out what we want moving forward. She broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. I don't want to lose you, Dean. I ached at her words, but I knew this was the right decision. Avery, I love you too, but love isn't enough to fix what's we need time apart to figure out if there's any chance of rebuilding our relationship, or if we need to move on separate decision heavy on our shoulders. Over the next few days, we made arrangements for the separation. Avery would send kids, making sure they knew this wasn't their fault and that we both loved them very much. The day she left was a goodbye to the kids. Knowing this was the end of an era was almost too much to bear. But deep down, I knew the house felt empty without her, but in that emptiness I found a strange sense of peace. I could breathe again, free on my work and on healing myself. It wasn't easy, and there were days when the loneliness felt suffocating. But I continued therapy separately, and after a few months we began to see each other occasionally, discussing the kids' tea, the anger I felt toward Avery, and Gavin lingered. I needed an outlet for all the pent-up frustration, and the idea of our healthiest way to deal with my emotions. But the thought of making Gavin pay for what he had done to my family was too tempting to ignore. One evening I felt as smug and carefree as ever, posting pictures of his gardening projects and hanging out with friends. It made my thing, living his life without any consequences. I decided to hit him where it would hurt the most, his reputation. Knew from Avery's gushing that he relied heavily on word-of-mouth recommendations and positive online reviews, to negative reviews about his business on every platform I could find. I painted him as unreliable, unprofessional, and even hinted at inappropriate behavior with female clients. The next security. I reached out to him explaining the situation and asking for his help. Jake was hesitant at first, warning me Ed to help me hack into Gavin's email and social media accounts. We didn't do anything drastic, just enough to cause a week. Gavin's business started to crumble, clients cancelled appointments, and new inquiries dried up. He posted but it was too late. His reputation was tarnished, and there was little he could do to fix it. While watching Gavin's downfall provided a temporary sense of satisfaction, it did little to alleviate the deeper pain haunting memories. I realized that revenge, while sweet in the moment, couldn't heal the wounds Avery had inflicted. I began to shift my focus from revenge to healing. I started taking better care of myself, both physically and mentally, like hiking and playing the guitar. I even joined a support group for people who had gone through similar experience after our separation. Avery reached out to me. She wanted to talk to see if there was any chance of reconciliation. I was hesitant, but I agreed to meet her at a looked different, more fragile and remorseful. Dean, I know I've hurt you in ways that can't be undone, she began. He key things right. I'm willing to do whatever it takes. I looked at her, the woman who had been my partner for so many EP's sadness, and a faint glimmer of the love we once shared. I don't know, Avery, I said honestly. I've been working on Gone. I don't know if we can ever get that back. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I understand. I've been working IP for granted. I'm not asking for forgiveness, just a chance to prove that I can change. Rebuilding our lives was a slow, but the road ahead was anything but smooth. During this time, the support of friends and family became crucial, the complexities of forgiveness and trust. One of my closest friends, Mark, had been there for me from the beginning, brother to me. He was the first person I called after discovering Avery's affair, and his unwavering support helped keep me grounded. Developments with Avery. Mark listened intently. Dean, I gotta say, you're stronger than I am. I don't think I could teeted, taking a sip of his beer. I sighed, feeling the weight of his words. Honestly, Mark, I don't know if I'm strong or just teetle. He nodded sympathetically. Just remember, man, it's okay to put yourself first. You've got to take care of yours. Said a few hours away, but made a point to visit whenever she could. Karen had always been fiercely protective of me, and she wasn't shy about expressing her opinions on Avery's betrayed TD Foundation. They had been married for over 40 years, and their relationship was something I had always aspirantly reminded me that I wasn't alone. Dad, how did you and Mom get through tough times? I asked one evening, ing his words. Dean, marriage is about commitment and understanding. There were times when we wanted to give you if you can find that reason again. Maybe there's hope. My mom, ever the peacemaker, added, but it's also about knowing when to let go. If it's causing more pain than joy, while sometimes conflicting, provided a balanced perspective. It reminded me that there was no right or wrong answer to our journey towards healing. I often found myself drifting into memories of our past. These flashbacks were bitter contrast to where we were now. One evening I sat on the porch, staring at the stars and letting my mind wander. Irene amid perfect and uncomplicated. We met in college, both of us attending a mutual friend's party. Avery had been the life of the party, her laughter her, and we spent the entire evening talking and laughing. By the end of the night I knew I wanted to see her again. An elaborate spread, complete with homemade sandwiches, fresh fruit, and even a bottle of wine. We sat under our plans for the future. It was one of the best days of my life. As our relationship progressed, we faced our fair share together. I remembered the time when I lost my job and how supportive Avery had been. She reassured me that we would get going. Our wedding day was another cherished memory. We exchanged vows under a beautiful arch of flowers, sir. I watched her walk down the aisle. I knew I was the luckiest man alive. We danced the night away, and I couldn't stop loved. Then came the birth of our children, Emma and Lucas. The first time I held Emma in my arms, I was overwhelmed. Avery and I were a team, navigating the challenges of parenthood together. Those sleepless nights and early morning on the porch, I couldn't help but feel the sting of betrayal overshadowing these happy memories. The woman who I remembered seemed like a different person from the one who had betrayed me. These flashbacks weren't just hat had appeared over the years. There were times when we drifted apart, caught up in the demands of work and parenthood. I couldn't ignore my own role in the deterioration of our relationship. One memory stood out a night about a year ago when Avery had tried to talk to me about her feelings of loneliness. Listen. In hindsight, I realized that was a turning point. Perhaps if I had been more attentive, more present, these memories, they also provided clarity. Our relationship had always been a mix of highs and lows, joy and pain. Of deeper issues that we both needed to address. The next day, during our counseling session, I shared some of these as I recounted both the good times and the moments when we had faltered. It was a difficult conversation, but it felt necessary. I miss those days, Avery said softly. I miss us. I do too, I admitted. Our therapist nodded. These memories are important. They remind you of what you've built together and what's at change. Healing is about acknowledging the past, but focusing on the future. We left the session feeling a bit lighter. Solution, but it was a step forward. We knew we had a long road ahead, but for the first time in a while I felt a glimmer, and its aftermath continued to take a physical toll on me. I started noticing frequent headaches, a constant feeling of fatigue, and a general sense of being unwell. I tried to I was experiencing, but it soon became clear that I needed to address these health concerns seriously. One morning dizzy, I decided it was time to see a doctor. Avery insisted on coming with me, despite our strained relationship. She aired her concern. The doctor ran a series of tests and asked about my symptoms and lifestyle. After examining the res, you're dealing with high blood pressure and elevated stress levels. Your body is reacting to the prolonged stress, and it's important that we address this before it leads to more serious. It was a wake-up call that I couldn't ignore. What do I need to do, doctor? He outlined a plan that included medication C and stress management techniques. He also strongly recommended that I continue seeing a therapist who would do the process, helping me implement the lifestyle changes the doctor suggested. She started cooking healthier meals, precise routine. It was a strange but welcome shift in our dynamic as we found ourselves working together towards a cure one evening. As we sat on the porch after a long walk, Avery turned to me with a look of determination. Dean, I know you through this. We've both made mistakes, but we need to focus on moving forward for our health and for our kids' ain of her betrayal. Thanks, Avery. I'm trying my best. It's just a lot to deal with. I know, she said softly, but we're in time. I also reconnected with my kids in a deeper way. We spent more quality time together, doing activities that we aids or simply watching movies together. These moments became a source of joy and healing for me. One night, as I tucked Emma and Lucas into bed, Emma looked up at me with her big, curious eyes. Daddy, are you feeling absent for too long? Yes, sweetheart, I am. And I'm going to keep getting better. I promise. As I left their room, I ran back to a healthier, happier version of myself. The journey was far from over, but I felt more equipped to face W appear, but we learned to live with it and to grow from it. We made a conscious decision to focus on the future, and 1 year later, update. Hey everyone, it's been a year since I last shared our story, and a lot has changed since then. Your support and advice have been incredibly helpful throughout this journey. After months of trying to rebuild our part ways, we realized that despite our best efforts, the trust and connection we once had couldn't be fully restored. A choice for us and for our kids. The divorce process was challenging, but we managed to keep things amicable, for we agreed on joint custody, and our primary focus was on ensuring that the kids felt loved and supported through because we had been open with them about the changes happening in our family. Avery moved out of our house. At first, I felt a surge of anger and betrayal all over again, but over time, I've come to accept it. She seems genuinely strange to think about, but I'm learning to let go of the resentment. As for me, I've been focusing on rebuilding my life for the kids. We've created new routines and traditions, and while it's not always easy, we're finding our way. I've reconnected with Ain. It's a slow process, but I'm learning to enjoy life on my own terms. Work has improved significantly. With the emo took on some new projects that reignited my passion for my career. My colleagues have noticed the change, and I'm well too. They've adjusted to the new living arrangements and seem to be thriving. Emma has taken up painting and and I make sure to be there for all their important moments. Therapy has continued to be a big part of my life. I see my therapist regularly, and it's been incredibly helpful in VD in the support group, sharing my experiences and learning from others who've been through similar situations. But it also taught me a lot about resilience, forgiveness, and the importance of self-care. I've come to terms with the team mean it can't be good.